This episode of Secret Door Podcast was brought to you by my patrons over at Patreon. If you guys want to support me and this podcast and keep it going, please go to www.patreon.com/Secret Door Podcast. Hey everyone, it's Melissa here. Just before we get on to today's show, a little bit of housekeeping. I'm going to be away from about July 4th till the 14th or 15th, so there won't be an episode amongst that week. I'm just taking some time off and recovering from work, podcast. But rest assured, there will be more episodes. I've got lots lined up for mid-July onwards, so I hope you enjoy everything that I come up with. Today's episode, I've got Kyle Yates from PITT Paranormal. He's on, and we're just discussing some of the investigations that he does, whether or not, how to know whether something's real or what kind of methods he uses, his experiences, different places he's been. We go through the whole line. I found it a really fascinating and interesting conversation, and I hope you enjoy it as well. So, let's get on with that interview. All right, today on the show, we have Kyle Yates from PITT Paranormal Investigators here today to talk all things paranormal, sort of let us in on some of the best locations and perhaps the most spookiest experiences he's had as an investigator. Welcome to the show, Kyle.
Well, thank you. I'm so glad to be on your show.
So let's just start with how things happened for you, how you got into paranormal investigation. Where did that begin for you?
Okay, I hope you got a long time because I got a lot of stories.
Perfect.
Um, when I was a small child, I say I was probably about 5 or 6 years old. I used to stay at my grandparents a lot, and they had an old house. And one night in the middle of the night, I woke up and I looked in the doorway, and there standing in the doorway looked like a suit of armor. And I didn't know if I was dreaming or what, little kid. I was kind of scared. I put my head under the covers and I peeked back and it was gone. Well, I just left it alone, figured I was just seeing things. And nothing else really happened around there. A lot of creaks and pops and stuff, but it was an old house, so you don't think of that kind of, being haunted or anything. But at my house that I grew up in, I was OCD as a kid. Everything had to be in its place. Everything had to be, certain direction, or it drove me nuts. So I had a collection of little toy cars and things like that. And I had them on a special shelf. I had them all pointing the same direction. But there was one car on there that I'd actually made myself out of wood in my grandfather's shop. This one particular car would end up being turned around the opposite direction every morning. Okay, that got me thinking there's got to be something going on. Well, my cousins would come around, and of course, we'd tell ghost stories and we'd get each other scared and everything. And it just really piqued my curiosity. And I thought about it, but I never really talked to anybody about it. When Ghost Hunters finally came on the air, I think I was probably in my mid 20s. Um, I was like, wow, there's actually people that go out there and investigate these things. And I was so fascinated with that show that I never missed an episode. And I thought, one day I would really love to do that. And I'd really like to go on an investigation with these guys. So let's fast forward a little bit. I was in my mid 30s, went through a divorce, um, got out on my own. I ended up raising my kids, And when they got older, I was like, you know what? I need to settle down. I need to find me a good woman. So I met my now wife. And funny thing is we met online and we talked for weeks and weeks and finally decided, hey, let's get together and finally go out on a date. Time came and she messages me and she says, I'm sorry, I don't mean to do this, but something came up. I have to cancel our date. Well, of course, I'm thinking she's just blowing me off. This is, not going to happen. But she kept texting me all through the night. And me being the inquisitive person that I am, I asked her, I said, what are you doing that's so important that you had to break our date? Because I'm like, she can't be with another guy if she's texting me. And she didn't answer me for probably 10 minutes. And finally, she texted me back and said, well, I'm actually doing an investigation for ghosts and with my paranormal team. And I immediately texted her back and like, okay, I need you to marry me right now.
That's awesome. That's fantastic.
but but anyway, she talked to the group and they were looking for another person and they said, come on an investigation, we'll try you out. If we like you, we'll put you on the team. So I am hyped up. I'm so excited. Go on this first investigation and it happened to be in my old hometown. And we got to the house, and of course, I'd watched Ghost Hunters long enough that I knew, hey, get the K2 meter out and you check to see if there's, any EMFs going through the house, that kind of thing. So I'm doing the sweep all through, and I finally decided, hey, can I go up in the attic? And they're like, yeah, sure, go ahead. I get up in the attic, and the wiring in this house is probably from the 1940s or 1950s. It's that old wire that has like cloth over it. I don't know if you know what I'm talking
Yep,
about.
I know
Yeah.
exactly what you're talking about.
So these people had actually cut back some of the cloth away from it and wrapped wires around it and had a light hanging from the ceiling off of this thing. The K2, I got it right up against it and it's going absolutely bonkers.
Yeah.
So,
You
you
found a
know,
logical source.
exactly.
So I have to ask you, was this first investigation, was this also your official first date kind of thing?
It was pretty much, yeah.
That's awesome. Well, at least you guys
Although
doing something you like.
although we weren't really supposed to be dating according to the rules of the group, but we just kept that to ourselves. Hey, I know I'm a rebel. What can I say?
Okay, so
But
how long ago was that? Like how long have you been doing this since that first day?
about 5 years.
And I'm going to assume you've got quite a few investigations under your belt by now.
Actually, we do, and I have some good stories for you. But yeah, that first one, I'll say I debunked it because of the wiring, and also they had an actual transformer over their backyard, literally over the backyard. So, I understand why they were getting the feelings they were getting. So, of course, I'm brokenhearted over this and thinking, oh man, nothing's ever going to happen. Maybe this is all fake, but I pressed on. Well, north of Houston, which, I used to live outside of Houston, north of it is this town called Spring. And Spring is got a lot of history. And there's a lot of places known to be haunted around there where there was a house that these people actually had moved out of, but they wanted us to go in and investigate it and, confirm that they weren't crazy. So we went, and me and one of the other guys, we went upstairs. And since nobody was there and I hate wearing shoes, I walked around barefooted.
Mhm.
And so we're going around, we're checking things. We went into this one room, sat on the floor, had the K2 meter out. It moved a bit, but we had a digital recorder. We were doing EVP session, and nothing really seemed to be happening. But all of a sudden, my feet started to burn, and I'm like, "What the heck?" And I didn't put that with paranormal. I just thought something was wrong with my feet, you know?
Mhm.
So we came downstairs, and there was the four ladies downstairs, and they were watching the monitor. And they said, "Hey, did anything happen while you're up there?" And like, "No, nothing really happened." I said, "I don't know what's wrong with my feet, but they started burning." And they started laughing at me. And I'm like, "What the heck is so funny about that?" And they're like, "Oh, there's supposedly there was a little girl spirit there, and they had talked to her and said, 'Can you go up and tickle his feet?'"
Oh,
So I'm like,
wow.
"Okay, so I'm the guinea pig here, right?"
That's crazy. So
So,
you actually had, like, some kind of physical experiences.
and didn't even know that it was happening, you know?
Wow. It just came in hindsight. So I'm sure there's a variety of different experiences that you go through when you're doing these kind of investigations. Do you have like a top 3 or 4 that come to mind? Like I'm sure there's some positive things, and I'm sure you've had some outright terrifying experiences.
Yeah, actually, I have. The most positive thing, I guess, that house I was talking about in spring. I went through the upstairs by myself, and when we came down to look at the video, it almost looked like a fairy. Now, I know a lot of people probably don't believe in fairies, but I can tell you that I do, and I'll tell you why in a minute. But it wasn't a bug, because we tried to, debunk everything we could, and there was no bug or anything. And this thing actually flew into my back and disappeared. And we found out that the little girl that was there, her name was Farmer, and she was a little white girl. Her parents had passed away. The family that adopted her were actually slaves at one time. They were a black family, and she was really just looking for somebody to, listen to her. And of course, we were ready to listen. And one of the girls was playing back the video again, and she took out her little camera, and she was videoing that so she could put it on Facebook. And we watched it, I can't tell you how many times. But we have a friend who's a medium, and we were showing her the video, and she goes, "Hey, did you hear that talking?" And we're like, "What?" She goes, "Listen." And towards the end of the video, you can, as soon as you see that little thing flying in my back, you can hear a voice whispering, "That was me."
Oh, wow.
And my buddy Rodney actually invited this kid to go back home with him, which, is a no-no. You don't invite spirits to come back with you because you don't know what you're going to get into. And he's had nothing but hell since he's had that little girl there.
Oh, wow.
Hmm.
Wow, that's amazing. So now, have you had any I'm assuming you have, but what would be the most standout experience of something that was, like, really disturbing? Like, say you had a terrifying, I guess what some people would say evil experience, or something followed you home, or it was just out of control. Have you ever had any kind of experience like that?
I've actually had two things happen to me like that. Now, are you familiar with Yorktown Hospital in Texas?
No, I'm not.
Okay, well, I know they were featured on Ghost Adventures, and I assume that y'all get that show. Um, Zach Bagans and them
Yep,
were there. They
yep.
we actually got pictures where they autographed the wall and everything. But this hospital was like a mental hospital at one time, and there were children that had disabilities that were basically just left there. And we had taken a picture out in front of the hospital. It was the whole group, and I really didn't think about the picture until later on, and I'll tell you that in a minute as well. But we did the investigation there, and after I left, I started getting this pain in my stomach. And I went to three different doctors, had all kinds of tests done. Nobody could explain why I was having so much pain. And it was to the point where I had to take pain pills just to make it through the day. And once again, we went back to our our medium friend, and she told me that there was a kid there that was in a wheelchair, and he looked at me as a fatherly figure. And since he had been abandoned, he attached himself to me, and he
Mm.
didn't mean to, but he was causing that pain that was in my stomach. And one of the guys on the group, he has this ability that he can pretty much get rid of things um, with his powers. I guess that's what
Right.
you call it. And she said, if you talk to him, it'll go away. And so I called him immediately, and I'm like, look, dude, I brought something back from this investigation, and the minute he started talking to me, the pain went away and never came back. And
Amazing.
and that freaked me out. Now let me tell you about the picture. We went back and looked at the picture, just, I mean, not really looking for anything, but when you look at the picture, there it looks like a hand is touching me right there on my stomach where that pain was at.
Interesting to have that sort of confirmation.
Oh, exactly.
Yeah, but you were I skipped right past this, but you were talking about fairies, and you alluded that about a belief in fairies. Where does that come? What makes you believe in fairies, or what do you think they are?
Okay, well, I'm glad that you went back to that because I've talked to two different mediums, and they both told me that they can feel the presence of fairies in certain places. And a second investigation that we did, and this is when my wife and I started our own group. We went to this house, and the video that I got going in these people's room, here comes it. It looks more like a fairy than the other one did. This thing flies in, goes through my chest and out of my back, or might be vice versa. I don't remember. But anyway, you can see it clearly go in me and then come out the other side. And for some reason, these things are attracted to me. So I don't know how else to explain it. It looks like a fairy, and I really believe that's what it is. And my
There's this idea that I mean, uh, on my old podcast, we've had fairy researchers, Irish people from Ireland come on, and I mean,
mm,
it's a real belief. It's not like ghosts, or like it is part of the culture, and people swear till to this day to have fairy sightings, and they're really actually quite nervous to tell anyone because it's embarrassing. They think people will make fun of them, but they've actually, I mean, there's like people being abducted by fairies, fairy rings. They actually have missing time. There's this people try to compare it to aliens and UFOs, but I've also heard some people say that it's could be something like more like earthbound spirit or something. Like
they
do
are.
you have an idea of like do you agree with any of those interpretations?
I do because my stepdaughters, actually I call them my bonus daughters. We don't like using the word step, but one of them is considered to be like a fairy. You know, how do I explain that without making it sound weird? But once again, the medium, she said she has the abilities like a fairy, and they're trying. She tries to stay away from this stuff, but my other stepdaughter, she has like a healing type ability, and
Hmm.
she's exploring more of that. Um, but the things that I've seen, especially video evidence, I have to agree that they have to be real. And I don't talk to a lot of people about that because, like I say, they want to say, "Oh, you're crazy. It's fake," or it's just stories. But yeah, I do have Irish in my background, so maybe that's why they're attracted to
Maybe.
me.
Because I think there's this book out. It's called is it called Modern Fairy Sightings?
Hmm.
It's something like that, but this isn't like a far-reaching, like it still happens. It's not from Ireland in the 1700s, or this is still happening where people in Ireland and in the United Kingdom are reporting fairy sightings or even abductions or things coming into their house and spoiling the milk, etc. And
Hmm.
they're not Tinkerbell. They can
No,
be quite nasty little buggers.
Uh, Well,
Pardon my French. I don't hope they don't get pissed off and show up here.
well, I know there's some that have that tendency to be more on the like you said, the nasty side, but then there are those that they are more, I guess, you say grounded. They are earthbound. They are one with nature. That whole healing and energy you get from the earth, and they are more helpful.
Right.
So, we're really into that kind of thing, crystals and stuff, and like the Wiccan religion.
Mhm.
My wife is more on the Wiccan side. I personally, I think of Odin as being my god.
Ah, a little Viking.
Yes, that Scandinavian part of me, I guess.
There you go. That's awesome. Okay. Now, you've talked about like you obviously use really scientific materials when you're doing this research. So you have your EMF meters, etc., and voice recording, but you're using mediums. So you're kind of going into two different realms. Like, does that like some people don't like to use? I've talked to investigators. I have another guy who showed up on other shows, and he does not like mediums at all. And I think mediums, especially if they're good, it's like why not? They could, what's wrong with it?
Well, personally, when I was younger, I did not believe in psychics and mediums and things like that. I just thought that was a bunch of hooey, and they would just listen to you and pick some things out of what you were saying and be able to tell you stuff. And there was some kind of trick to it. But we got invited to one of my wife's friend's house, and they were having a reading party. And so we went there, and I wasn't really going to get a reading. I was just going to sit there and watch and see what was going on. And that particular day, she had turned around and she looked at me. She says, "You just lost someone, and his name starts with a B." And mind you, I had barely even said hello to this woman. And just hours before, I was at my grandparents' house when my grandfather passed away, and his name was Byron. And so I was like kind of freaked out a little bit. How in the heck does she know this? And as this reading is going on, she starts saying, why do I keep hearing the water boy? Now, I'm sure you've seen that movie before. Uh,
Yes.
that is kind of running joke between my wife and my bonus kids. We always quote something from the water boy, H2O, H2O, Gatorade, back and forth. And, we joke about that all the time. Nobody else knows that. That's an inside joke with us. And we just looked at each other and started laughing. And she's telling us all these things that there's no way she could have known before we got there.
Yeah,
Absolutely not.
they're just too specific and intimate details.
Exactly. And so I really started thinking, wow, this has got to be real. And so later on, I say when we started our own group, we invited her and another guy to come join the group. So we've got two mediums, we've got their perspective and see if they both kind of come up with the same things. As a matter of fact, we did an investigation, and she came out and told the lady, our client, that she had an aunt, and her aunt had abandoned her daughter, and the daughter had died, and that was the spirit that was causing all the problems in her house. And the lady's like, "You no, you're way off. I don't have an aunt, and she didn't have no, an aunt with a kid and all this stuff. This didn't happen. So first thing pops in my head, well, maybe this isn't real after all. The
Right.
la- the lady calls me back a couple of days later, and she's freaking out over the phone. And I'm like, what's wrong? And she says, I spoke to my mother, and she said that she had a sister that the family had disowned because she had left her husband and went out, drinking and doing drugs and all these other things, running around with all these men. and had a baby out of wedlock and just gave the baby up. And she just was freaking out. I'm freaking out because I'm going, oh my God,
Confirmation.
confirmation right there. How do you
That's
explain it?
right. So, I mean, like I say, it's another tool that you can use to get some more insight into what's going on. So, I mean, if there is a problem, like say some like there's a lot of hauntings where people it's not intentional, but the actual whatever's in their house can actually make them ill and sick. And if somebody can have some insight and solve that for them, then they can actually live in the house.
Oh, exactly. Um, we we have a town close to where we live called Liberty Hill. Liberty Hill is a very, very old town. The land that we went to, the in the house, the land belonged to a guy who was a founder of the town, and the the male medium that we work with, he couldn't come, but he told us over the phone all this information before we even got there and saw the place, and was telling us, hey, there's seems to be some kind of plumbing problem. Like there's water soaked in the floor, and he says, I see a fire. There's an electrical box in there, and there's a fire. And I'm like, okay, I'm gonna take that information with me. And he told us some other things that came true, but I can't think of them right now. But here's this electrical box in the kitchen by the back door. My EMF detector is going absolutely bonkers walking by this thing because it is not wired very well. It is a disaster. And I asked him, I said, has there ever been a fire here? And lady said, no, never had a fire. I said, well, I guess he's off on that one. But apparently they did had some plumbing problems, and there had been some rotted wood in the floor from the plumbing. And 2 weeks later, the lady calls me up and she's in hysterics. I'm like, what's wrong? She said, that electrical box caught on fire. And I'm just like, okay, how do I explain that?
Well, that's important. Like just because they're saying it does, like you said, doesn't mean it's happened. It could be something they're seeing in the future.
Oh, exactly. They don't
And
always know, if it's happened now or it happens
well,
later.
and that's the thing. Like it may not even be a ghost. Like I mean, it could be like if you've got electricity beaming out and wires loose and bad wiring. I mean, that could make you possibly sick.
Well, and a lot of the time we were there, I thought, well, maybe because the wiring and stuff was why there was having a problem. But when you go into the living room, the EMF didn't go off at all. And I went every inch of that living room, and the thing stayed on green.
Mhm.
And so I left it there, and kept investigating. Didn't seem like anything was happening, and we got our SLS camera, and I was so excited when we got that because I was just couldn't wait to try it out. And went all around the house, didn't get anything, and we were sitting in the living room talking. My wife has the SLS camera pointing towards this chair and the couch, and all of a sudden this figure just showed up on the screen, and it's mapping it out, and I'm going, okay, is this just an anomaly or is this really happening? So the first thing we say is, can you wave? And this arm comes up and starts waving at us. I'm like, this is incredible. And the next thing you know, the thing starts to lean over towards the couch, and it's just kind of leaned over. And we mentioned that to the client later on, and she said that was her mother's chair. Her mother had passed away, and her mother used to lean over that chair on the couch whenever she would sleep on the couch. I'm like, oh wow, this is crazy.
You guys, there's just a lot of really good, like not just stories, but like an abundance of confirmations and experiences and data. Like I okay, you can't call it raw data, but it's still there. I mean, it's still like reconfirming that we don't know everything. Like we don't actually know exactly how psychic phenomena works, but it happens.
It's amazing, and we've always been steered in the right direction. I mean, the lady medium that we have, she told me almost 2 years ago that I would end up in Austin, Texas, and I'd have a good job. And you're like, oh yeah, everybody says that. And a year and a half ago, we moved up here next to Austin, and I work for the city here, and it's like a great job.
Everything she said. There you go.
Every, Everything she said, I love it.
Okay. I hope you're enjoying the interview thus far. Remember to visit secretdoorpodcast.com, click the guests section on the menu if you want to get all the information on your favorite Secret Door Podcast guest. So remember, secretdoorpodcast.com, click on guest in the menu, and you can find out all the information to our guests on the show. And if you want me to share your ghostly stories at the end of each podcast, send them to extrasensory13@gmail.com. That's extrasensory13@gmail.com. A little bit different experience. Have you ever gone into a location and experienced what would be known as like a poltergeist, like inanimate objects or things moving and flying around or anything that may be caused by someone who's living?
Well, I didn't get to see it, but we had a client that had told us that their storage facility that they would have stuff get moved around all the time, and it's not just being absent-minded. I mean, like the little jar they have on their desk with pins in it, the pins would end up out of the jar and across the room, and keys would get moved and things like that. And you kind of think, well, maybe that's just them, and they're just not realizing they're doing it. But I say I didn't see this for myself, but the things that happened in that storage facility made me think that there had to be something along the lines of a poltergeist or something.
There's a lot of like the SPR in England. There's a lot of research coming out that's saying that like they're pointing poltergeists in the direction that it's highly linked to human psychology, like someone's pent up energy, somebody, like they don't know, it's all unconscious, they're not actually
Hmm.
moving it like themselves and trying to lie, they're not, there's, it's actually really terrifying for them, but they're like there's going to be somebody with some sort of repressed emotions that's really a deep psychology, and their research is pointing to a lot of human psychology affecting it.
Oh yeah, I definitely believe that. I mean, you can bring a bad energy with you anywhere, and which is why we try to keep as positive as we can. And we have the crystals and things like that to help keep that positive energy going. Because
Hmm.
I don't want anything bad happening here, and you never know when you're going to bring something home.
Yep. And like there's people, if somebody has, like say somebody has a mental health issue, I've seen
Hmm.
that where everything's fine. There's never any, paranormal anything in this person's house, and this person's there, and all of a sudden they were like, you could tell something was wrong with them, and a dish flew off the counter and shattered on the floor.
Oh,
No, nothing, and it was we like they left, and everything felt fine, and nothing ever happened again. But when that person's around, every once in a while, something will move, and like something strange will happen like that. And we just said, you know what? I think it's linked to that person. I'm like, we're starting to make a connection here.
well, the crazy thing about that storage place, um, we had been there for hours, and the male medium was with us, and he really wasn't picking up on a whole lot, and we were getting kind of disappointed and figured, oh well, nothing's happening. He finally said, I've got to go, but he said the first building that we went to, you need to go back there. And so we went back in there, and were just sitting there, just me and my wife. Nobody else was in there. All of a sudden, it sounded like a party was going on in there. Everything, all the doors were rattling. It sounded like it was a hailstorm, raindrops hitting real hard or something, and to the point where I had to get up and go look out the door and see if it was a storm. It was quiet. There was not even a breeze.
Did that
And
not terrify you?
it kind of freaked me out a little bit. I ain't gonna lie, but I'm the idiot that when they tell you don't go into that room, I'm the one that goes in that room.
Yeah, because I would be disturbed by something like that, that kind of energy being whirled up, like storm, like that's pretty intense.
Well, and I guess it's the curiosity in me that outweighs the fear. So I'll get locked up in an attic for 2 hours by myself. I don't care. I want something to touch me. I love that adrenaline rush.
Hmm.
But at one point, we were sitting there, and it sounded like somebody came into the building and was walking down the hallway, and it was so bad that I thought somebody had broke in, and so I keep a gun with me all the time, and I
Hmm.
got I got my gun out, and I was ready to face somebody. I went around the corner, and nobody was there.
Wow.
And I almost forgot earlier when we were doing the first walkthrough. I went down a hallway by myself, and as I'm walking back, I actually heard a breath in my ear, and I started to say something, and they're going, "Did you hear that breath?" And they're down the hall. I'm like, "Wow, that was that loud." So that place was really exciting. I didn't catch much. I mean, on camera, um, you maybe could have said they were orbs flying in there because they weren't staying in a straight line. They were kind of doing their own little pattern, but being a storage place in the dust, it's
Bugs, yeah.
yeah, it's very hard for me to say, oh yeah, that was an orb. I don't put a lot of emphasis on orbs.
That's good. Yeah, because there's multiple things they could be, and it's hard if you haven't seen it, right?
Exactly.
Like, and it's later, yeah. Like EVP, electronic voice phenomenon. Some people are really critical of that. What's your feelings? I mean, I know you said you've heard voices on it. Is your feelings that actual spirits communicating?
I really do believe that they use those devices to speak through. Um, we have a specific rule when you're doing an investigation with our team, and I don't care if you got something to say, you speak out loud, don't whisper. If you bump into something or you shut a door, you automatically say, "Hey, that was me. I was doing that."
Yeah.
So we know it's not one of us, and you would ask specific questions and you would get specific answers. So I don't see how that could be, just an anomaly that happens.
Hmm.
It's got to be something there. There's an energy. We are energy. Our bodies are energy, and you cannot destroy energy. It's got to go somewhere.
Yeah. It's got to go somewhere. I often believe that a lot of the like ghosts or like figures that people see, like I had a strange experience after my cat passed away. I believe that we're just I think the death dying process is a lot longer than we're aware of, and it's part of that. I think it's why like old haunted locations from England, people don't see them as much anymore because they've just slowly faded. Their energy has sort of faded away. So I'm thinking, I think for a lot of things, especially if it's really traumatic, it's just part of the process, and we're all spooked out about it. But it's just this like process we can't see.
Oh, definitely. And I believe that I don't remember what the term is, but like wood and certain stones, minerals can absorb this energy and be almost like a tape recorder and play it
Yeah,
over and over and
like
over again.
like the stone tape theory.
Yeah, that's what I was trying to think of. So, your energy is going to go somewhere. That's all I'm saying.
Yeah. And in this crazy world it can show up in a whole bunch of different ways.
Yeah, as long as it doesn't pop in the shower, when I'm in there, it's okay.
It's all good. All right, I gotta ask, have you ever, because the one place that I've always been leery of the idea of going into is like a prison. Have you ever
Oh,
investigated a prison? Because to me, that's some dark stuff.
I am so glad you asked me that because a year after my wife and I were together, we finally decided to get married, and we had our honeymoon in Ohio. And everybody says, "Why would you go to Ohio?" Anyway, they have the Ohio State Reformatory, which of course has been on Ghost Hunters, Ghost Adventurers, all these other shows. And we signed up to go on an investigation with Steve Gonzalez and Dave Tango from Ghost Hunters and Amy Allen from the Dead Files,
Wow.
which was incredible. Oh, and Samantha Hawes, the daughter of Jason Hawes, who started TAPS, the Ghost Hunters,
Right.
she was there.
So you went
Um,
on a whole like adventure with them?
yes, that was awesome.
Amazing. Okay, well, you gotta tell us about it.
Okay, so we get there. Mind you, there is quite a few people there, so you can forget EVPs and that kind of thing. There's too many
Yeah.
people talking, that kind of
Right.
stuff. So we pretty much relied on our K2 meter. Well, we went into one cell and I asked question after question after question. The K2 never moved. So I'm getting disappointed. Well, Samantha Hawes comes by and she says, "Hey, can I join in on y'all's little session?" I'm like, "Yeah, come on in." And she starts asking questions. And I kid you not, that meter finally started moving when she would ask the questions. So that was so incredible. Now I've still got my digital recorder with Dave Tango doing an EVP session with us. When we finally got to a section where there wasn't a lot of people, but we didn't catch anything. But the experience itself was pretty awesome.
Is there any stories? Like, is there a reason you went there? Is there stories of negative or bad spirits being in this prison?
Well, on I know watching Ghost Hunters, they did capture a lot of different evidence there. It's been so long since I've seen the episode, I can't remember everything that happened, but that was kind of one of those things on our bucket list, you know. And so
Right.
not only did I get to fulfill my dream of finally doing paranormal investigations, but I also fulfilled that dream. I got to do it with the Ghost Hunters.
That's perfect. Well, like, like imagine going somewhere like Alcatraz or something like that.
Oh, I'd love to go there.
Yeah.
I've had friends that have been there, and they said that the tour is out of this world. But I'd love to do an investigation.
Oh yeah. Yeah, I would just love to go there, let alone do an investigation. But I have seen like, oh, there was some place in Australia, um, and a jail. They spell it GAOL. They spell it different than us, but it's this jail that they have, and it was like they're going in. Of course, it's on TV. They're dramatizing it, but
Mm.
I don't know if I'd want to sit in a jail cell all alone by myself all night long. I'm not sure. I'm not sure. I'm how well in the pitch dark. I'm not sure how well I would like that, for the entire night.
Oh, I know. Well, you know, one thing about television, I really like the Ghost Hunters because they would do investigations and they might not find anything, and they'll if they could debunk it, they would debunk it. So I really admired those guys because they weren't trying to, just, oh, look, there's always ghosts here. There's other shows I know for a fact, and I'm not going to mention the shows, but they will have crew members go and knock on the walls where you can't see where they're at, or,
Mhm.
they'll, run a light around the wall, all these kinds of stupid stuff. And that has really hurt the business, if you ask me. I know a
Yeah.
lot of people believe in them and like, oh, they're so great. They're always finding stuff. But you know as well as I do, you can sit there for hours and hours and hours and nothing happens.
Well,
And
I'll tell you something. I used to write for the Curious 14 with Matt Cook. He's from the United Kingdom, and
mhm,
he was working. He did a lot of film production and stuff. So he was traveling through Europe, working on some HBO documentaries, and he approached people about filming. Getting funding for filming something on because he does intense research on poltergeists. So he's sort
mm,
of like my little paranormal partner in crime, but he's very, SPR. Like he doesn't do the investigations anymore. He's doing like a lot of research on the Enfield poltergeist right now and trying to get in touch with people from that thing from like the whenever the 70s it was. Anyways, he approached people about getting funds together to film a documentary about some ailment. He was going to make up a treatment and all this stuff. And they literally told him, unless you can guarantee the manifestation of a ghost for entertainment purposes, forget about it. So he couldn't just do a documentary thing on poltergeist and explain them, in an educational way. They said, "Now we want a ghost to manifest." So that tells you what there are a lot of productions and places are in it for, because they want people to watch. They want the hype. It's like Barnum Circus. They want to be like, ooh. And so
Mm.
that's what you have to do to get for a lot of productions.
Oh yeah. Well, and you know the ghost hunters, they actually spend like a week or even up to 2 weeks in a certain location just to get the little bit of evidence that they do. So, you know, people like me that they only get maybe one night to do an investigation, of course you're probably not going to get a whole lot.
Hmm.
We do have one coming up in Seguin, Texas. We're going to be there for 3 days. So that's exciting. It's the first time I'm getting to actually spend a whole weekend and maybe actually capture some great stuff.
Well, yeah, because the longer you're there, the more likely you're going to, I mean, catch stuff. I mean, you could be there on an off night where you're there for 4 hours, nothing can happen. You could be somewhere for 20 minutes and something could happen. But the longer you're there, the more data you're going to be able to catch
Oh,
or capture.
exactly. Exactly.
So, is there any case or famous case from history that you weren't involved in that was really inspiring to you, or that you sort of like idealize, or that's like the ultimate case, like that there was all manifestations? Is there anything like that that you have as this epitome of investigation or paranormal research?
Oh, for me, it has to be the Stanley Hotel in Estes Park, Colorado. Um, Watching the ghost hunters and seeing all the things that happened while they were there. I mean, they had a glass sitting on the table and it just shattered. And when they had the cameras running all night, they'd be asleep and the doors would open and close. And of course, Stephen King, that was the place he would stay at when he wrote The Shining. And so there's been so much history and so many stories about ghosts and things. And I've known people that have been there, and they said, "Yeah, it's got a real creepy vibe to it, and things happen." So I want to stay in that specific room that Stephen King stayed in because it's supposed to be the most haunted.
I bet you have like a paranormal bucket list that you're like
Oh,
check 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 check.
oh, you better believe it. You know, the Stanley Hotel. We want to go to the Magnolia Hotel, which is actually going to be down the street from where we're going to be investigating in Seguin. Um, oh my gosh, there's
What
the
about
back.
what
Oh,
about
go ahead.
like what about some place like the Winchester Mystery House?
You know, I really like to go there. I don't want to get lost.
Yeah, like you'd have to leave like a little string behind you.
You know, and I know it's been done so many times, but I'd kind of like to check out like Waverly Hills and maybe Bob Mackey's.
Oh yeah, yeah. That's
Uh,
a great location. Oh, I know what I wanted to say. I wanted to say, what's your opinion? Have you done graveyard vigils or anything like that? Do you think they're haunted? Because a lot of people say, nah, they're not haunted. But then I have people who say, I had a horrible experience in a cemetery.
well, I have done two cemeteries actually, and one of them was a an old Civil War uh, burial place. There was actually a family that was buried in the ground in their stagecoach, and they got attacked by Native Americans and killed. So you expect maybe there might be a lot of activity there, but my opinion is, yeah, there may be some places that have something attached to it for some reason, but why would a ghost want to hang around where his body's laying at? Why wouldn't he want to, or he or she want to go to, you know, the home that they lived in, or you know, a hotel, even some place other than where their body's
Yeah,
buried?
yeah. I mean, like the only reason I could think of like is not where their body's buried, unless that had some sort of meaning, or they get like it's usually where they occupied, or where some sort of really intense traumatic energy happened to them that they've just expressed that terror out and it's stuck there.
Oh, exactly.
And it's usually not where they're buried. Although the only thing I could think of is if some people are doing some sort of strange ritual stuff repeatedly in that area.
You know, and I believe in that kind of stuff too. I mean, my wife used to live in Louisiana, and you know they've got a lot of voodoo.
Hoodoo, yeah, voodoo, yeah.
Hmm. And so, yeah, I believe that stuff works, and I think you can open doorways if you're not careful what you're doing. Especially, people think, oh, well, the Ouija board's just a child's toy. That's not a child's toy. I know those things work, and
Hmm.
you have to be careful, and you make sure that you close it, and you don't don't bring something in that's can take over your household.
Well, I know in a lot of magical sort of occult rituals, if you're going to call on something, I mean, you need to be really well prepared, really well researched, and you need to be really like you're calling on them for the specific thing. You are in control, and then when you're done, you're kind of banished. You have to set those parameters. And most people who do this sort of rituals, like they're really well disciplined and practiced, and they've been doing it for 10, 20, 30 years. And they're not just calling on stuff to be nasty or whatever. They have some sort of purpose. So that, and they're not just letting them go randomly. And I mean, if you believe in that, they're not just letting things, calling it and going, oh yeah, well whatever, and playing havoc and doing psychological games with people. And like people who always want to hex people and curse them all the time. It's sort of
Hmm.
like, you gotta save that stuff for something like where it's applicable to the most severe, situations. You just don't dance with that stuff around all the time.
Well, when you're dealing with magic, especially like witchcraft and that kind of thing, if you go and you want to put a curse on somebody, you got to be prepared for that to come back on you because it's going to come back on you tenfold. And another thing is even if you're asking for something that you think, well, this couldn't hurt somebody. You say you went and you asked for $1 million and you do a ritual, and the next thing you know, you have a relative that dies and leaves you $1 million.
Mm,
Well, you
yeah,
you just you
that's
just lost that family
that's what I
member.
mean by you have to be really, really specific in what you ask for and realistic. Like you have to be really specific. Like I want $200 from my work. None
Mhm.
shall be harmed. Okay, like you have to be really specific in what you're saying, and you can't just be really nilly willy about it.
Oh, exactly. And another thing is like when you talk about conjuring spirits and stuff. We are firm believers that you respect the dead,
Hmm.
and they've already gone through some kind of trauma, or I mean, they're dead for heaven's sakes. Why do
Yeah.
you why do
Let
you want to
them
disturb them?
rest. Yeah.
Yeah, let them rest. Don't disturb them. Don't if they're not already lingering around and doing stuff. Don't call them up. Let them rest. Leave them alone.
So now that we're in this sort of area, have you ever had any experience with somebody being possessed or demon or possession or anything with some priests to have to exercise something that's really, I mean, some people might see that as someone with a mental illness, but then there's other people who are like, no, this is like they believe in demons. What's your take on that?
Well, I know that it can happen. Um, I don't think it happens quite as often as people want to make it out that it does. And it doesn't, I don't believe it affects people like you see in the movies, the head spinning around, spitting pea soup
Mhm.
all over the place. But it can take on a form like depression, things like that. It could cause actual illness in your body because you've invited something in that is I don't know how to explain it. It's kind of contradictory to your soul. So you're harming yourself. Uh,
Yeah. I think some people don't even do it intentionally. I think some people can be in a weak position and
hmm
they get weakened. They could even be from an illness. Perhaps they get a divorce or perhaps someone died. They get in a weakened situation, and for whatever reason, something kind of latches onto them. I don't know if they're doing something or they start talking, or I mean, there's all sorts of, like, I watch horror movies. I've never been possessed by the devil, but some people believe that if you watch horror movies, something can possess you. Um,
It's your
I don't
state of
know.
mind.
Yeah, it's a state of mind. Like that's why I have a friend who was doing exorcisms, and she was saying, she had someone messaging her, and I was said to her, "Look, you have to cover all your bases. You have to cover illnesses. You have to cover perimenopause with people. You have to cover mental health. You have to cover whether they have a borderline personality disorder, a bipolar. Have they, have children been sexually molested? Are they being abused in the house? You have to cover all those things first because." If you don't and you don't cover those and that's the problem, you're not providing them with a really good solution or really fully understanding it. Like, don't just jump to they're possessed. There could be so many other things happening in their household that you have no idea about, and they're hiding it, and then they're just telling you it's a demon possession because they don't want to face the reality that's happening in their household or something.
Well, I could tell you a personal experience, and I'm not going to say I was possessed, but I did go through a dark period in my life where I was extremely depressed. And I do believe that the we are drawn to this kind of paranormal stuff because we all have gone through that kind of thing. For some reason, that draws us to it. Um, but I'd gotten so depressed. I was not leaving my room. I was always sitting in the dark. I painted my walls black. I just didn't want to have nothing to do with anybody. And I started hearing voices, and they were telling me to do things that I normally wouldn't do, like, go kill yourself, that kind of stuff. And my children actually found me curled up in the closet, and I was like an infant at that point. And so I made the decision that it was time to go get some professional help. And I went, and of course, I got the diagnosis of the PTSD and
Hmm.
um, bipolar, anxiety, the whole nine yards. And believe me, that those are things that are very hard to live with.
And
But
they're very real and they affect a lot of people, and there's no shame in it, right?
oh,
Yeah.
exactly.
I mean, and they can be managed once
And
you get the right
oh,
help, sorry.
oh yeah. Um, I, I I do handle it a lot better now, and of course, my wife and my bonus kids, they've been such a big help to me too. Um, the one daughter that I said she kind of like a fairy,
Hmm.
she can actually grab my arm, and when I'm having an anxiety attack, and she can make that panic go away. But to getting back to the whole going to the mental hospital and getting all the treatment and everything, I was like, you know, I I never thought that anybody could actually hear voices, and I attributed that to my mental state. But later on, we would get up in the morning when I got together with my wife. She kept telling me there's something here, and kind of made me think about some stuff that had happened before. And the medium came and went through the house. She says, "Well, you have a cemetery right down the road, and things would come through the house, and they would just kind of pass through and then move on." And I'm thinking, "Oh my gosh, I wonder what if this was what was happening, because I mean the voices just went away that quickly." Um, we would get up in the morning, and my chair, which is a lazy boy, would be turned upside down. And I mean, my cat's not going to do that. My grandfather, when he passed away, they gave me his clock, and it's a big grandfather's clock. It's
Hmm.
got a huge base on it, and that thing would be laid over on its side every morning. And how come I didn't hear a crash when in the middle of the night? So all this crazy stuff would happen. We actually had a vortex or portal, whatever you want to call it, in one of the back bedrooms. And it took a lot of saging and things like that, and it quieted stuff but never stopped it.
It didn't stop it, and it was just the location where you were living. I mean, that's really fascinating that you said like you were having these voices and there's things passing through that were that I find that like like you can have mental health issues and you can have different issues. I mean, I've been, depressed and I've been divorced before. Like I've gone through divorce, so I know how like you can get really, really negative. And but there's also the positive side of you who is like, and like it doesn't seem to me like ghost hunting is a negative thing. Like you get joy and good
Hmm.
stuff out of it. But I think there might be locations in certain specific places that can have those effects on people, or at least intensify what's going on in their life.
Well, when you've got people like me that have gone through the depression, my father committed suicide and my little brother committed suicide,
Yep.
and of course, I'm thinking that was just our destiny to all die. But I think one of the fascinations that I have with the paranormal is I want to know that there's something better after you pass away,
Yeah, that
and
makes
then
sense.
and that they're really okay, you know.
And I think you've got a lot of good confirmation from especially mediums and stuff that you're researching in some of these places. I mean, you've had positive experiences that have reinforced that there's things happening and there's communication. I mean, my cat passed away, and we would hear her all the time in the house the first 2 weeks, and I was laying in bed and she literally came and like just like she used to like walk over my head one way and walk over. I could feel this tingle and energy and these paws stomping on my head. So I knew right away. I was like, I'm not hallucinating. I don't have hallucinating problems. I've never had that again. It was there, then it wasn't there. I was like, this is, that's that experience. Because other things I could explain away, but that one, I was like, no, there's something happening. Like something is really there after that. Like it's not just the end.
Well, it's funny that you mentioned that because when we moved up here, my cat, I'd had him for like 10 years, and he was my best friend. He always knew when I didn't feel good. He would come lay on me, and he'd always be by my side every time I was sick or I was just in a bad mood. And he got real sick. He got a like a liver disease, and there was really nothing that they could do for him. And my wife volunteered to take him to the vet and have him put to sleep. And I wasn't going to go. And then I got to thinking, if I don't go, I'm going to regret it one day.
Yep.
And so I was there, I was petting him, I was looking in his eyes, and I mean, it was like I had just lost a child. I
Oh, I know.
cried. You,
Yeah.
people can say, "Oh, it's just a cat," but
No, no, no.
he was part of my life. And after he was gone, I mean, I was distraught, and you could swear he was still in the house. And the other cats that we have, they would go lay in that one spot where he stayed when he got real sick, and he would never leave. He wouldn't go eat, drink, or nothing. He just stayed in that one spot. And all of a sudden, the other cats started flocking around that area. I'm like, what the heck? But I mean, it's been several months. I got another one, and she's my little buddy too. She does the same exact thing he did. She comes and crawls in my lap every time I don't feel
Oh, that's
good.
awesome. And cats are supposed to ward off evil spirits and be healers and protectors. So that's good. That's good news.
I believe that
All
too.
right, we're coming up on the hour. So I'm going to ask you this question. It's
Okay.
like a fun question. Outside of the United States, if someone said, here's an all expense paid trip, you can go to anywhere internationally outside of the US you want to investigate, where would you be like, oh, I've always wanted to go to this foreign location and it fascinates me? What would be the place you would go to?
That's an easy one for me. Ireland. I want to go there so bad. There's those castles. I've got to go to those castles.
Yeah. And it's the land of the fairies. Land of
Exactly.
the fairies. And if you've got Irish blood in you, you have to go.
I know. I'm the odd one out because I don't drink anymore.
That's okay. You know what? Oh, our culture relies too much on drinking. It's like whatever. Have a soda water or pop or whatever you call it, cola.
Um,
Everybody calls it something different.
oh yeah. Well, growing up, we called it soda water. That's all the old folks I grew up with. That's all they called it. You called it you called it pop down here. We're like, ah, you Yankee.
That's funny. All right, so where can people find PITT Paranormal if they want to come looking for you guys? And do you have like video footage and stuff that people can check out online?
Yes, actually, we do. We are working on a website, and from my understanding, it's going to be a little while before we get that up. But if you go to Instagram and you look up Pit Paranormal underscore positive underscore vibes, and by the way, Pit is spelled with two T's. My Instagram page has a lot of our photos and a lot of fun stuff that we do. I don't just post paranormal on there. I do inspirational videos every morning. I try to pass those positive vibes on.
It's fantastic.
I'm on Instagram all the time. You won't find a whole lot of evidence because I scrutinize a lot. If I have even the smallest little bit of doubt, I don't put it on. So I've got tons of stuff I don't put on there. If you go to Facebook, we are PITT Paranormal Investigators.
Not the Tulsa group.
No, we're not. We're not in Tulsa.
There's there's a PITT Paranormal Tulsa, and that is not them. So keep scrolling because there's another PITT Paranormal.
Yeah, but it's PITT Paranormal Investigators if you're looking for us on Facebook. And yeah, don't mention Oklahoma because we're Longhorn fans here and we hate Oklahoma.
Okay, well, we're on my show on our website. I have a guest page. So for anybody who's listening, PITT Paranormal and Kyle, you'll have a space on the guest page. So when your show comes out, you'll be top person, and it will show all your links and everywhere to get in touch with you. And I'll put links in the show notes as well, so people can check you guys out. And you know what? Support the people that come on this show. Go and like their Facebook page and go follow them on Instagram. And follow me on Instagram too. I'm Secret Door Podcast. You seem to get a lot of people who will just follow you for followers, and then you follow them back and they'll ditch you. It's like, hey, what up? It's like, just follow.
Happens all the time.
I know.
I don't get it. I just don't get it.
Yeah, it's like they're just going for numbers. They're not going for content. So whatever. Anyways, yeah, that's great. Is there any last words you want to say before I close off, or anything?
Well, actually, if you don't mind, I don't know if y'all follow Twitter, but we have Paranormal Investigative Team Texas on Twitter. Twitter. And we actually do a podcast as well. So if y'all are interested, we're on every Tuesday. It'd be 7 Central Time. I don't know what time y'all are on up there. But if you get the Spreaker app, we are a part of Paranormal Buzz Radio, and our show is called Into the Pit. And of course, that's spelled with 2 T's, and there's dots between each of the letters. And you can find us also on iHeartRadio and Spotify.
Okay, that's perfect. That's great. I'll try to get all those links up there. That's fantastic. Well, that's great. Thank you so much for coming on the show.
Thank you. I had a blast.
Yeah, well, if you guys ever need somebody in the future to come on your show, give me a message on Instagram. Well,
I'll probably do that. And if anybody wants us to promote their group or their page or whatever, if you'll send me like a picture with the link on it and all that kind of stuff, I'm glad to post it on our page, on our Instagram, our Facebook, all that stuff. So,
all right, guys.
Love to help out everybody.
All right. Well, thanks everybody for listening. This show is probably going to be out beginning of July, just to let you know off the bat. So, thanks everyone for listening, and I hope you guys have a wonderful day, evening, whatever time it is, and we'll see you again on Secret Door.